Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to this very, very special webinar that we are running for the first time. I just want to check that we are definitely live. Let me see if this catches up. Yeah, I think we're live. To a very special webinar that, inshallah, we're going to be going into a really, really important topic that is close to all of the hearts of people on this webinar, and doubtless a lot of the people who are listening. And it comes down to the basic question: where on earth are our halal student loans? That's the question that we're going to be digging into today to work out what the answer to that is, and what we need to do to get halal student loans to be sorted out as soon as possible. I'm going to stop talking and introduce the esteemed panel that we have today. It's like the Avengers film with all the different people with all their different skill sets. I feel like one of those, one of the Avengers. So with me we have Stephen Timms, MP from East Ham. Brilliant to have you, Tim. We've got Asha Hassan, who's a medical student who's been very, very active in campaigning on this issue, and who has actually, you can share your own really, really fascinating and incredible story about how you managed to fund your student journey as well, Asha. Lord Sharkey, who's been a tireless campaigner on this matter and also a number of other matters that are helping underrepresented minority communities get the justice that they deserve. We've got Hassan Judy from the MCB lending their voice to this campaign as well. And we've got Tom Woolf, who I discovered you're a former athlete, Tom, which is fantastic, but also an entrepreneur and very successful NGO campaigner around education matters. So I guess let's dive in. So the first thing really that I wanted to get across to people is, when we have these kind of events, sometimes you feel like, it's all not really worth anything. We're all kind of talking to each other, and what's the point of doing this? But the message to come across here is resistance is not futile. There are very, very clear examples of successful campaigns that have worked. And I'd like to hand over to you, John Sharkey, to give us a few examples that you've personally worked on, exactly like this, grassroots endeavors that have ultimately, resulted in really, really seismic changes to policy and legislation. So over to you.
Thank you, Ibrahim. I thought I'd start by explaining a bit about how I got involved in this in the first place. I'm a member of the House of Lords, and the House doesn't normally sit on Fridays. And so before COVID-19 shut us all in, I used to go to speak in schools about the work I did in Parliament. One of the schools I went to, now nearly 7 years ago, was the Preston Muslim Girls High School. And I was really impressed by the staff and especially by the students. I tried to answer their questions, but there was one question that I didn't expect and couldn't answer. The question was simple. It was, why was there no Sharia-compliant version of the standard interest-bearing student loan? And I admitted that I simply didn't know the answer. It seemed to me to be obviously wrong and seriously unjust to have a barrier in the way of students who were certainly qualified and wanted to go to university, but for whom interest-bearing loans were simply unacceptable. And the girls I spoke to were certainly qualified for going to university. So that was the beginning of a long campaign to make Sharia-compliant student loans available. There's been some progress. The government acknowledged the problem quite a long time ago, and it proposed a solution. It proposed using what is in fact a well-known Islamic finance product called the takaful. It even passed a law 2 years ago to give itself the powers to make and to offer the takaful to students. But unfortunately, we still don't have this alternative non-interest-bearing system of student finance. And every year we don't have it, every September, there'll be some qualified Muslim students who don't go on to university because of the interest-bearing student loan system. And this has been going on for too long and is very, very deeply unsatisfactory. The government knows what the problem is. It accepts that it can disadvantage Muslim students. It has taken the power to give us a solution, but it hasn't given us a solution. It hasn't even given us a date by which they will provide a solution. And that's one of the reasons that we're holding this webinar. We want to put pressure on the government to finally do what it long ago promised to do. We need a final push. Governments do respond to this kind of thing. And certainly it's often quite normal for governments to dither and delay. I've worked on many issues that have taken a long time to resolve, issues which were sometimes we felt would never be resolved. But perseverance really does pay when you're dealing with government, especially when it comes to holding the government to its own promises. For example, I've been involved in a very long campaign to bring about a debt moratorium and a campaign to stop payday lending abuses. Both those campaigns were long, but we never gave up. And both campaigns eventually succeeded. I'm also currently involved in a campaign to help people who, through no fault of their own, are trapped in very, very expensive mortgages. And as a result, some of them are losing their houses, in greater financial difficulty, greater debt, and are completely trapped. This is a very long-running campaign, but we haven't given up at all. And government is now actively engaged with us, and I expect we'll find a solution sooner rather than later. So my message really is very simple. We must persevere with demanding Sharia-compliant student loans. Perseverance does work. It worked for the debt moratorium, it worked for payday lending, and I believe it'll work for the mortgage business. And I believe it'll work for Sharia-compliant student finance if we are vocal enough. Yes, it's taken too long already, but I do believe that success is within our reach. We need to keep going. We need to press the government hard. The government knows we're right. They promised to deliver. If we keep reminding them of that promise, then I'm certain that we will win.
No, thank you for that, Lord Sharkey. That's really, really powerful words, and frankly, it's the truth, isn't it? If we plug away at this, there are real examples, and the work that you've done is testament to that we can succeed at this. And the government, as you said, they've already said they want to do this. We just need to push them over the line. But let's think about what happens if the government doesn't deliver, and maybe I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Asha, on your personal story and the struggle that you've gone through in trying to finance your university journey, and the examples of others that you've heard of as well. So over to you.
My university journey has been it was very uncertain, the most uncertain period of my life. But I'll take you back to when I was in college, and I'll tell you a bit more about my background. So if anyone's in a similar background to me, hopefully you can relate to this, and hopefully it allows you to keep going. So my mom is a cleaner. She works in a solicitor's office, and she's a single parent. I have other siblings who already decided to not go to university. And so I'm not from a well-off background at all. And turning to home for financial support to help me university wasn't an option. But despite this, I had this, when I was in college, I had this master plan of, my future and changing the opportunities that I'd have and the opportunities that, people after me would have. And my master plan was how to get out of the ghetto. And it's funny to say this now, but I genuinely believe that education was the way out. Education was the way I could, if I worked hard enough, and if I just did as much as I could, then I'd have all my answers. And what gave me this belief was I took part in loads of access schemes when I was in college, and they basically showed me that university wasn't out of reach, and it was something that I could aspire to. And it was this thing where, basically, I'm not sure if it was my subconscious sort of messaging that I had as a child, but it kind of broke the mental block of my ability and what I was capable of. And so I decided, I'm going to actually do whatever I can, and I was able to not just do my entire A-level maths in a single year. But that was after I finished secondary, after being told I couldn't even do anything higher than a foundation. So it really gave me the first time I had the permission to be like, okay, my background doesn't matter. It matters on how hard I worked, right? And so I'm in college. I'm sitting in front of my chemistry teacher. We're doing our one-to-ones, and he's very excitedly telling me that he's going to predict me an A-star. And it takes everything I have to say to him, sir, I'm not applying. And he's like, he's shocked because, you know, everything that I've been working towards in my college, I literally put so many hours in, was just so I could get to university and have a better future and have a better education. And then what happened was he just asked me, okay, what's happening? And I had to try and explain to him, oh, it's because of the loan, and now it's, you know, they've added interest and they've tripled the fees, so I can't afford it. And also I don't want to take out interest because it's kind of a big deal in my religion. And he looks at me and he says, you know what, Asha, I understand. Do you want me to speak to your parents? And it was so hard to have to explain to him that it wasn't my parents. This had come after months of going to lectures, of trying to speak to people, of speaking to my own siblings who'd already decided that, you know, university wasn't an option for them. And, you know, Googling, is interest really haram? Is it really that bad? And then ultimately coming to that conclusion that, you know what, I can't start my whole future that I've, you know, been working hard for based on something that I feel like I'm compromising on, something that's my identity. So I tried to explain it to him. I basically just accepted the situation. I just said, you know what, this is life. It's tough. Keep it moving. And I don't really need an education to do well, and I can find out other ways to do well. So it's 4 months after I finished college. I'm working. I'm going to my night shift on the bus as my job as a carer. And someone sends me a message about the consultation response in 2014, where the government basically say, okay, we are aware this is an issue. We are aware that students, you know, this is an inequality, and we're going to do something about it as soon as we can. But because of the technicalities, it won't be available until 2016. So I'm like, you know what? Dusted off my master plan, you know, that #1 education thing. I was like, you know, I can do this actually. If I just defer my entry and apply right now, then I could still have an opportunity to go to university. So I applied to university. I applied to medical school, and I deferred my entry. Within a few months, I'd already had my unconditional offer because I had the grades. I had everything that was needed, and now I had the permission to actually apply. So I applied to university, and fast forward 2 years later, when, you know, just as I'm about to start university, there's been no information. I've been refreshing the student finance website every month. No information, no updates, absolutely nothing online from the government about this alternative. So I'm back in this position again where, you know, the same position I was with my teacher, where do I just accept this? Do I just accept that university isn't for me? Or do I, like, what can I do? And I had no idea what I could do. And I knew I didn't want to compromise unless I tried everything that I could. And so what I said to myself, you know what, Asha, I'm just going to promise to do whatever I can. And as long as I do whatever I can, then I'll make the decision, or I'll have to at least know that I've done everything in my power before I either give up my medical school place or I take out the loan. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just said, for now, just do what you can. And I think it was because if it was any other course, I probably would have just accepted the reality and just got on with my life. But it was medical school, and it was the golden ticket, and I just couldn't let go of that, you know. So I started university, and since then it's just been miracle after miracle. But before that, I'm not going to say it was easy. It was really difficult, and I know a lot of people who are watching this who've also had to self-finance university know about the physical and mental toll that it takes to try and get through each year. I was working night shifts because I had full-on placement and lectures during the days, so I do as many night shifts as I could. I'd work full-time and then any overtime as much as I could manage. And I remember one day, like I'm in GP placement after a night shift, and, you know, I'm just writing on my notepad, like just writing so much on my notepad. And my friend's looking at me thinking, oh wow, she's taking a lot of notes. And she's like, oh Asha, like, you take a lot of notes, don't you? And I'm like, yeah, I take a lot of notes. But what I was doing was scribbling to keep myself awake. So it was just so difficult. And being that kind of person, you know, wanting to be a good student, but feeling like I was inherently less than and inherently less capable or less able to be at university just because I couldn't afford it. And just because I came from a background that, you know, my parents weren't able to help me go through university. And so it was feeling constantly less than, feeling constantly less able, and also feeling like I was a nuisance for having the audacity to try and be there anyway. So it was such a difficult period. But a promise that I made myself, which was I'm going to do anything that I can and try anything that I can. And I had 2 rules for myself at uni: was stay awake and act normal. If you do those 2 things and if you keep going, then you've won. That's the game that I was playing. It wasn't about trying to figure out how I was going to finance everything, because I knew that was impossible. I just didn't come from the kind of background where that was possible. And so basically, I don't want to ramble too much, but just by having that promise of doing whatever I could. And the question that I kept asking myself is, what can I do? That so many doors opened up for me that I didn't even know existed. I mean, I'll if there's time at the end of the webinar, I'll tell you about all the miracles and how things worked for me. But just by literally saying that I'm just going to keep going, I couldn't even predict. It was way out of my own awareness. It was way out of my own sphere of what I knew was possible, how things just worked out for me like that. And so the reason why I'm sharing my story in this way is just to tell you guys that you don't know the future. You don't know how things work out. You don't know which doors will open. But the only thing that counts is the effort, and the only thing that counts is how much you try. And if you're from a background that's similar to my own, don't give up. Literally, if it means just going to university until they kick you out, do that. And also document your experience as well. So don't give up, guys, and don't accept reality, and let's not accept a system where, you know, it's people like myself who can't get an education. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. Also, one more thing. My sister said we were watching Mo Farah run the other day. And there's something about the human species that is better than any other animal, is that we can outrun any other animal. We can outrun cheetahs, we can outrun wolves, we can outrun horses, not because we're faster or we can get there quicker, but because we keep on going for longer. That's literally it. That is our superpower. So please keep going, let's keep trying, and let's not give up and accept this situation.
Incredible. Many thanks for that, Asha. And I guess, you know, I would hope that we can outrun Boris Johnson as well.
Exactly.
I just thought that was a fantastic image I had. I just thought I had to share it. Really, really powerful testimony from you, Asha. And look, I think you're fundamentally quite a special person, right? And you know, if everyone was like you, we probably wouldn't have to, you know, have this webinar. But the amount of difficulty that you've had to go through to get a degree, and it's not even finished yet, and you're going to continue having to fight for this to avoid student loans. Is something that we don't want to have to happen to anyone else. I'd like to quickly, pass over to both or either of you, Stephen or Hassan, because on this topic, I know, you know, I'd love to get other perspectives as well. You know, Stephen, perhaps you've heard from your constituents, or Hassan, you know, from other members of the Muslim community. I'd love to hear your perspective. Perhaps if I go to you first, Stephen.
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear all about the miracles that Asha benefited from, but of course it shouldn't need miracles for people to be able to complete their university studies. And I mean, Lord Sharkey's been campaigning on this for a long time, and I think it was 2013, wasn't it, that the then Prime Minister David Cameron, speaking at the Conservative Party conference, announced that the government was going to provide Sharia compliant student finance, and everybody applauded. And 8 years on, nothing has happened. I think this is a good moment to pursue this issue again. I've absolutely no doubt it can be done, because it is government policy, it should be done. It's just a question of forcing them to get a move on and do it. And I think one reason why this is a good moment is that just this week, the Conservative Party has had this report about the problem of Islamophobia in the Conservative Party. So, I mean, this is a clear example where a promise has been made. They just need to get on and deliver it. And I think later on in this webinar, we're going to talk about writing to MPs. I think MPs will be pretty responsive to those letters, whichever party they're in. And I would hope that we can mount up serious pressure and get the government to announce and commit to a timescale for doing what it's already said it was going to do. So I've already this evening tabled a question for the Secretary of State for Education. The next education question session in the House of Commons is, I think it's the 21st of June, later on in June. And if I'm successful in the ballot, I will ask him when this is going to be done. But I think that's what we need, lots of MPs to ask questions like that. And I'd be very hopeful that as a result of that pressure, we can finally get the timescale that we need.
Many thanks for that, Stephen. And just a reminder to everyone, please do feel free to comment away with your questions for the panel, but also your own stories and difficulties that you've been through as well in the chat, and I can always share that with everyone as well. And then one other thing to mention is, before we get to the, we'll go through a lot more about, why we'd like you to write to your local MP. But if you drop off early, then please do feel free to check out the description in the below the video, and there you'll see a template letter that you can use to customize and then write to your own MP. And you'll see a link in the description as well, where you can write to your MP really, really simply and easily, even if you don't know who he is, like I didn't before this webinar. And Stephen Timms actually helped me find my MP. So go to that website and you'll be able to check that out. But I'd love to come to you, Hassan, and share from learn from your experiences and from the conversations the MCBs had around this topic.
Sure, thank you, Ibrahim, and good evening and assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all this spring, turning summer, hopefully, evening. Weather's picking up certainly in the last couple of days. First of all, thank you, and I'm very grateful for the preceding speeches and kind of messages of support on this campaign from Lord Sharkey, Stephen Timms, Asha, and your very, I think, personal story, and I think one I'm sure shared by many other Muslim youth up and down the country. And that's really what it's about. We have to remember at the end of the day, this is about our young people, it's about our next generation, and it's about ensuring that those who want to have opportunities in the future have access and opportunities to the education that they deserve. I'll try not to repeat what others have said. From the point of view of the Muslim Council of Britain, we of course are supportive of this for a number of reasons. We are a membership-based body for hundreds of mosques and charities and Muslim associations across the UK. And part of our mission is empowering our members and by extension Muslim communities across the country, all 3.5 million Muslims in the UK, to take an active and a participatory role in public life. Number two, of course, is to get involved in politics yourself, whether it's in local politics or at national level, whether it's broad in political parties or whether it's specific in specific campaigns like this on single topic issues. And thirdly, it's forming alliances with other actors, other organizations and parties in civil society. And that's why it's really good to have the likes of Tom here from EdAid, who is coming at this from a different point of view, but is also supportive of this campaign. The second point I thought I'd just touch on is around, let's talk about a couple of numbers here. How many Muslims enter university every year? So a rough guess, a rough estimate, at the last census in 2011, of course we've had just a census now in 2021 and the results will be out within the next year or two, and of course we'll be eagerly awaiting those results from the Office of National Statistics and number crunching to get the latest view. But I guess as of the last census told us that 330,000 Muslim adults are in full-time education. So to put that into context, that's about 18% or 1 in 5 of the Muslim adult population. This compares to about 8% of the overall or the general population. The reason for double the figure of the overall population is mainly for those of you who are familiar with the numbers. Muslims in the UK are very young. It's very skewed towards the younger age bands, and of course that then translates into the number of Muslims in education, whether part-time or full-time, whether it's at college or university, vocational or academic degrees, etc. But what I mean to say by this is, as a proportion of Muslim adults, those who are in the education space studying full-time is a big fraction, bigger than the general population. And that's another reason why this topic and ensuring equal and fair access to that education in our universities and colleges, etc., is extremely important for our Muslim communities. And the last thing that I would add before moving or passing on to the next speaker is a bit of context. I think part of this campaign is really holding the UK government to account from that first pledge by David Cameron in October 2012. But remember where that pledge was made. It was made at the World Islamic Economic Forum. That conference, the MCB was part of that. We played, our Business and Economics Committee played a big part in actually bringing that forum for the first time to London. It was the 9th forum organized. It's originally Malaysia and it's toured around the world. And that was the first time that was held in the UK, in London. And of course, David Cameron was our Prime Minister at the time, but also it was in London and hosted by the then Mayor of London, who of course is our now current Prime Minister. And I'll just pick out a sentence from one of his speeches that he gave at that conference, where Boris Johnson, Mayor of London at the time, October 2012, said, hosting this prestigious conference also presents huge opportunities to promote London as a world-beating business hub, highlighting our status as a major center of Islamic finance and as a compelling destination for foreign investors. And I guess that link, that commitment around Islamic finance, and of course, this isn't purely about Islamic finance, it's about opportunities for young people, and it's about how can we broaden and make this a win-win opportunity for all those who are involved in the finance sector and those who want to engage, avoid interest-bearing loans for their education. So with that, I'll pause. I hope that was useful, and I'll pass on to the next speaker.
No, really kind and powerful words, Hassan, and appreciate the work the MCB's been doing on this and the support the MCB has put behind this campaign. And I guess that's probably a very apt point to hand over to you, Tom, where you're at the, I guess, coalface of thinking about how to reform certain bits of financing education. But I guess I'd love to hear a bit more about what potential solutions there could be that you've been involved with, but also perhaps a little bit of a run through of what on earth has actually happened over the last few years, because most people, even most Muslims, they wouldn't have been fully aware of what's actually been happening year to year. So to the extent that you can shed some light, and then perhaps Lord Sharkey as well from a parliamentary perspective can shed some light on what's been happening, that would be great. Over to you, Tom.
Well, listen, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here and with such an esteemed panel. I think that I'm going to leave some of the technical process and the politicking to Lord Sharkey, who knows the kind of system far better in terms of how things have moved and potentially could move on from here. I just think it's really important that as we collectively come together, that actually that nothing isn't unachievable. I mean, Asha, I look up to you so much. I always feel like after every conversation, I feel like I'd hire you in a nanosecond to come and run so many projects here, but I feel like our NHS and the world needs you far more than perhaps EdAid needs you. But you could literally, it's like someone said, there's dandelions in the world, and you can put them anywhere, and they'll plant themselves, and they'll establish themselves, and they'll blossom. So for me, the work that we get to do is to serve students like you every day who just want a fair shot. They're not looking for extra handouts. They're not looking for any other special treatment. And for me, a halal student loan, a Sharia compliant student loan system, or to make it very simple, just an alternative funding system that's open to anybody who's up for a slightly unconventional world. And in this dysfunctional world we live in, why does everything have to follow the same path? And so one thing I'd like us all to take away from is that none of us are born or made the same, and sometimes a one-size-fits-all doesn't work for everybody. And so the first thing I think is that we look at an alternative financing scheme that anybody in the UK can benefit from. And I think that's got to be a primary driver that we all get behind, and that those of different faiths are not starting 20, 30, 40 meters behind the start line just because they don't have the access to the opportunity. The second point I'd love to really focus on is that by doing so, there are three big winners. And actually, I don't think we all quite understand the economic pyramid here. The people that benefit the most from this are the university. By being able to enroll more students, they grow their revenue per cohort. They're having to turn students away at the moment because Islamic students and those students from different faiths saying, I can't take the conventional government loan. And as a result, that university has spent thousands of pounds in Facebook ads, in campus events, trying to acquire that customer. They're actually in debt to that individual if you think about any kind of funnel metrics. And as a result, that student says, I can't attend. Can I have a scholarship? Can I have some alternative funding? And what happens is it becomes quite a conflict-based conversation. I can't stay on the course. I have to leave, or I don't come at all. That leaves an empty seat on a course. And as a result, that university can't actually fill that place again. So actually spend all that money trying to acquire them. So they're actually, the university is losing. Yet if the university can convert that student to someone who can come, it prospers. It generates another £27,500 of income. It's a huge amount of money towards its total cost, towards benefit. Another thing is the Treasury benefits massively. Graduates on average earn considerably more than non-graduates. So as a result, the government, by investing in people early, whether that's FE or undergraduate or postgraduate courses, the Treasury benefits enormously long term. And then the individual, on a third order effect, benefits from growing their household income, being a greater part of civic society, being able to move into the professions. I certainly was able to benefit from my education, even though I had to borrow. And so that ability to be able to lever, we use leverage to be able to buy a bigger house and not be renting. And we need to be able to move everybody in society from the rent economy to the ownership economy, from the jobbing and the odd jobbing and then the bit work, the gig economy to the professional career economy. And by blocking out such significant parts of society from doing so, actually leads to further conflict and barriers and a lack of understanding and professional kind of upward motion. So what we focus on at EdAid is how do we empower more and more students to be able to get access to economic empowerment, growing their household GDP, and focusing on those courses and those programs that enable them to do that. So it's that magic Venn diagram: university, institution, government, individual. And particularly as the government, to your point, Stephen, has been talking about this idea of lifelong learning and a new career skills budget and the FE agenda. Well, not everyone needs to go to university, but how do we open up that new government education wallet if we're going to exclude a big chunk of that 3.5 million people that want to become plumbers and builders, and not all going to be Dr. Asha, who's an absolute superstar, but actually they wouldn't be able to access that scheme. And so what you end up doing is you end up levering and pushing those parts of society who can't access any education further down. And that grows all sorts of socioeconomic problems, as well as political indifference and cultural indifference. And so I believe actually far more than just this being an alternative financing scheme, this is actually an economic lever that is so simple to solve. If it's not Treasury, I'll come and see you guys from 7 till 9 a.m. every day of the week until we solve it and bring our technology and our solutions and work together with you. But I do believe there are some very simple things. If we can come together, if we can talk about alternative finance and take some of the political kind of point scoring out of it, get cross-party consensus, that within the next 12 months we can have this up and running. And I know there's support. Mary Cook, who sits on the SLC's board, would drive this through at their end from a technical and implementation perspective. She's an absolute rock star and has been leading higher education in the UK for many years. We just all need to get behind a simple message that an alternative financing scheme is equal to, should be open to everybody, and something we can get behind. And honestly, we'll pro bono all our support and time to make this happen, because I think fundamentally it's far more around just a religion piece. It's about economic empowerment piece.
Completely agree, Tom. And yeah, I mean, all of that makes a lot of sense. And I guess, you know, to give the listeners a bit of a sense, and, you know, we'll hand over to Lord Sharkey, and you can correct me if, you know, where I go off piste. But, you know, in a nutshell, the solution that's being proposed here doesn't, you know, put Muslims at any, you know, better position than anyone else. And at the heart of it, there's this, you know, cooperative insurance kind of model that sits at the heart of it. So, you know, it's not like you don't have to be a Muslim to see the value of, you know, cooperative insurance and, you know, pooling your assets, as opposed to, you know, having an interest-based loan given to the student loans company. And, you know, it's a very, very different kind of vibe, and you don't have to be a Muslim to kind of see the value of that. But Lord Sharkey, I'd love to, you know, hear about the, you know, the travails that you and others have gone through campaigning on this topic in Parliament, and also, I guess, you know, what do we need to do next?
Thanks, Ibrahim. I mean, I think that I'll start off by saying that the government has already said, but I think this was about 5 years ago, that the alternative student finance product would be available to anyone who went to university and not Muslims. They understand in the design of the product the need for an absolutely level playing field and equal access to this. So it doesn't confer a benefit on Muslims. It just gives them equality with people who take out the standard student loans, and anybody under the new system would be able to take out this alternative student finance system. So in some senses, the government has clearly been doing some thinking about all this. And I know it's been doing some planning, but I also know or suspect and really am convinced that they simply haven't been paying enough attention. Governments are always busy. They're always mostly overwhelmed by circumstances and by events, as we've seen over the last couple of years. And getting them to focus on anything is a matter of pressure more than anything else. And if there isn't sufficient pressure, the government will let things go to the back of the queue. It'll delay and dither and equivocate and generally kind of not do much. And sadly, I think that's the case here. The government hasn't felt under enough pressure to actually produce something. It knows what to do. It knows how to do it. It knows who will administer it. It also knows, and it said right at the beginning, what the benefits would be. Regrettably, it hasn't done because it hasn't actually had enough pressure put on it. And I do think we're at the stage now where pressure has begun to have some effect. We are wearing them down. They're showing signs of weariness at our questions and our prodding and our prompting. And we want to continue that right now and for the future to make sure that in the short to medium term, we get this thing actually on the road. And I think what we should do next, I guess we could talk about this more in a minute, what we should do next is certainly write to MPs. Stephen was absolutely right about the influence MPs have on this. Government will listen to MPs, and if enough MPs put pressure on government, they will act. The excuses that the government has for not acting have almost vanished over the years. They have all the powers they need. They know what they have to do. They know everything about the scheme. Now it's simply a question of doing it. And it is true also, they are almost certainly going to revise the further education system, which I think is a good thing. The lifelong learning loan may also turn out to be a good thing as well. But here is a time when the government is reshaping the system. Now is the time, with people's attention on this, to do something about providing a halal student loan system.
Many thanks for that, Lord Sharkey. So, I mean, we should now really talk about, what it is that you, our audience here, the 90 or 100 odd people that are listening to this right now, and probably the thousands that listen to this over the next few days, what is it that you can do that can tangibly change the course of Muslim students' lives over the next few decades? And I guess in a nutshell, the answer is that we need to raise awareness that this is an issue, right? You can't, if you're ill and you don't go to your GP and tell him or her, then it's not the GP's fault if they don't cure you. So we need to be talking to our local constituency MP and raising the issue with him so that he knows that Muslims, particularly care about this matter, and so that he can raise it with the government. And I guess at this point, it would be great to turn to you, Stephen, as the resident expert on all things MP related and letter related. What do you like? How do you actually deal with a letter that comes in, and what's an effective letter, and what's like an effective way of speaking to MPs and that sort of thing? How can we make this the best the best kind of interaction we can have with an MP?
I think it's very important that letters are brief and succinct. Keep it to one side of paper, or the equivalent length of an email, making a very clear request. And I think we are making a very clear request here, explaining that, as we've heard, the government has already committed to do this. We just need a date when it's actually finally going to happen. And I think, you know, MPs are pretty responsive when they receive letters of that kind, and will write to the minister, will table a question in Parliament, will help to build up the pressure that we need at this crucial time for this campaign. If you don't know who your MP is, and Ibrahim and I had this conversation at the start, you can easily find it out by going on to the Parliament website, parliament.uk website. On the front of that, there is a box, and you put in your postcode, and it tells you instantly who your MP is, and gives, you know, contact details for them as well. So it's easy to find out who it is, and let's whack in those letters. I think we have a suggested letter template, don't we, that we can show to people that gives an idea of what to do. But it really doesn't need to be complicated or difficult. But in fact, the more straightforward the communication is, the more effective it's going to be. And I think you're going to find that MPs will respond positively to receiving communications along those lines.
Many thanks for that, Steve. And guys, if you're, I mean, don't waste any time. Do it now whilst you know, the iron's hot. There's a link below where you can download in the description a template of the letter. Please do, you know, try and bespoke it to put in your own words, your own experiences. You know, perhaps you were a student, how you dealt with it, your family, your kids. Maybe you are going to become a student and you're going to have to pay for this stuff. Give your own personal experience. Keep it simple. And then go on the second link in the description where you can write your MP, you know, using the online form really quickly and easily, and get that sent in. And, you know, let's get that ball rolling, because, you know, to give you a bit more context, and, you know, perhaps Lord Sharkey and, you know, Stephen, you can shed some light on this. But what's going to happen here is that the more MPs are raising this question with the government, the more pressure is created, the more this looks like this is an issue coming at the government from multiple angles. And obviously, we're going to follow up from an organizational perspective, you know, with the MCB and other, you know, large Muslim organizations, where, you know, we'll be writing a letter to, you know, the government and asking for a meeting and asking for this issue to be dealt with urgently. But that will only really have traction if all of us do our little bit, where, you know, you're writing. So please do that, you know, as we speak as well. I guess, you know, at this point, it would be great to, you know, open the floor up to, you know, anyone who's got any further thoughts. And I'll just, I guess, to initiate some conversation, just post up some of the comments that we've been getting, which is, you know, some of these stories are pretty intense. Like Sierra Ahmed is saying how she had to personally finance 5 kids through university. And she's been hoping every year for some progress on Islamic finance, but nothing has happened, which is, you know, pretty crazy. And I know personally some families have moved to Scotland because that's the only place that they can actually get Sharia compliant finance, which is, you know, obviously, you know, it's free for them. Yeah, absolutely crazy stuff. Please feel free, by the way, any of the panel to comment on these as I post them up. This is a particularly interesting one, you know, where people are talking about the mental impact this has on the individual. Yeah.
I think I answered that one. I had to take a year out because, like, you're very isolated in this. You know, well, universities are very known for the well-being services, but you can't even access that because no one can really help you. There's no real solution, and so you really just take it upon yourself. So I can definitely relate to that, and it is crippling, and it's something that we have to work on.
Yeah. I just wanted to I saw some comments about, you know, not university isn't for everybody. I just wanted to reiterate the point I made earlier. Absolutely, it's not for everybody, but the current government plans for further education, for technical education, for all sorts of upskilling, we're all going to have this portfolio career where we do many different things over a lifetime, 4 or 5 distinctly different careers. And so it's about when a new system comes in, particularly for this technical education and these FE loans, it's not just university, it's every post-secondary education doesn't have an alternative. And therefore we are locking out hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people from society. This is not a small sideline issue. You cannot go and learn bricklaying at your local FE college without getting a post-secondary loan for FE college. Now, it's not free like it used to be. And as a result, for many of the Muslim brothers and sisters in the UK who choose not to take this based on their faith, would not be able to access that. They would have to self-finance. And so it permeates every single level. So we should think of this as university being part of that post-secondary mix. It's good because everyone can get their idea behind it, and university is the most expensive. So it's like how I find £30,000 for my tuition and £30,000 to live, probably over the same course of the 3 years. But it's something that will impact everybody in households in up and down the country. And so really my call to arms is there won't be, university is not for everybody, but absolutely that post-secondary education is for everybody, and we have to find a way for an alternative financing scheme, because the government adopts it for universities, they will then be able to adopt it for all FE and technical education.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, one story that I heard very recently was a guy. He got the grades, he got the entry to study medicine at Liverpool, but ultimately, because of the fees issue, he ultimately had to take a different path and went down the apprenticeship route. And he's a bright guy. He's done well, but he had set himself up for his entire life to try and get to medicine, and it wasn't due to any fault of his. He did everything he needed to get in, but sadly, because of the lack of halal student loans, he didn't get there.
Just to answer on Morrisuk's point, I think the reason why the government's taken so long is because no one's really asking anything. We've just been quiet for the past decade, almost decade. And so if we want something to be done, we just have to not stop speaking about this and keep persisting.
I think Asha is entirely right. It's because our voice hasn't been loud enough and hasn't been there frequently enough. And I think that being there, being loud, will work. And we're at a critical point. The government's revising the system. It's made a promise. It's being embarrassed now frequently by people in Parliament asking about it. We need more voices, more frequently, to say the right thing to the government.
Absolutely. I guess this is, this comment from Asma is a good point about how you can get grants and bursaries, and Asha, you benefited from that, and to be honest, I benefited massively from that as well. Although I was from the pre-9K generation, but the bursaries and the grants really helped on that front. And I can share a link in the chat with everyone for a compilation of the various different scholarships, grants, and bursaries that are available for UK students and also particularly Muslim students that you can access. So make sure that you do avail of those. It isn't in the absence of this change in policy, it isn't completely all doom and gloom. There are other solutions out there. Buy now, pay later schemes around education, and particularly master's level programs exist now, and a lot of them are actually Sharia compliant if you look into the terms and conditions. So please do don't give up on education. There are actually ways that you can still try and hack it.
100%. Sorry, go ahead. Please go ahead, Asha.
I'll just add and say, sorry, that apply to as many bursaries, because you don't know which one will, even if you get rejected from 100, apply for 200, because you don't know which one will work for you and when.
Sorry, Tom, you're gonna say something?
No. Obviously, listen, we at EdAid and Kurdistan, we support a number of alternative financing programs at the postgrad or kind of boot camp technical STEM level, where all of our plans are Sharia compliant. But we're just a small part of the puzzle. We're a small private foundation. We can't support at scale that the government can. But technically, there is no barrier to this. I just want to be very clear to some people that are saying that there is a technical barrier. This is just about the will to build and to take some of the politics out of it and look at how to drive something better. I mean, literally, the systems are built. They wouldn't even need to build anything new. It is simply the technical standing is there. It is the will. The other thing I would love to say, and and for us all to get about it. It doesn't dilute this message, but for every parent out there who's managed the comments, for every potential student, the apprenticeships in the UK, degree apprenticeships in the UK and normal apprenticeships are not inferior in any way, shape or form. A lot of us may have long-standing ideas of apprenticeship dating back to the 70s and 80s, but those don't exist. You can go to the best universities and you can be paid to attend those universities. Please, as your first port of call, whether you're a 15-year-old thinking about higher education or you're a 55-year-old who's thinking about getting back in the mix, degree apprenticeships are transformative. You graduate with zero debt, you're paid to study, and you are 3 to 5 years ahead of your peers. They don't do any apprenticeships. It's not our gig, but I would honestly, for my children and for my friends' children, I humbly implore them to look at every apprenticeship out there in the market first. It is a game changer, and there is sometimes social cachet inferiority because Oxford and Cambridge don't have them, but every other red brick has them in the UK, and every other employer, from Google to Amazon to honestly, there's nobody, and we work with thousands of employers. They see apprenticeships as a premium to an undergrad, traditional undergrad, not inferior. So please, I implore you to also today look at those. If you're thinking about going to university in September, look at those. They are a credible, if not a superior option. And I hope that nobody decides not to go because they don't think they can afford to go this September or in January. The government will take some time. We'll put some pressure to make the changes happen, and we will make them happen. But in the meantime, please, it would be hugely disadvantageous to anybody who thinks I'm going to put it off and not go until this gets sorted, because we have no guarantee of that. And the best time to level up is today.
100%. And it's especially like this. I think this is such a perfect time for this policy to change, given that we're exiting the EU, or we've exited the EU, and we're forging a new path. There's a rise of all sorts of new technologies that we need to upskill for, and we don't necessarily all have the government doesn't necessarily have the money it used to do. So we need to think about innovative ways to finance, and here's a great one. One question that has come up that perhaps either Stephen or Lord Sharkey you want to take is, should you personalize letters or not when sending them in?
Well, yes, I think you should. I think it should be obviously to the named MP, and I think a bit of your own experience, if you can add something, or experience of people you know in the letter, that definitely helps. I mean, any MP receiving one of these letters, looking at what's happened here, will see that the government's position is completely indefensible. They made a promise, they've just not got around to keeping it. And I think anyone looking at this will reach that conclusion. And so these letters, I think, will be really helpful in pushing the government, putting some pressure on them finally to do what they promised to do years ago, now making it happen.
Yeah, and Stephen is absolutely right about that. Now is a critical point. The government will respond if there is enough pressure.
Absolutely.
If I may just add to that, Ibrahim. Just to add, it's of course send a letter. I think that's the absolute minimum. But what we would also encourage is, don't stop there. Send one letter. If you get a late response, if you get a blank no committal response, send another one. Keep up the pressure. Encourage others in your family and friends who live in your same constituency to send a letter. If you are part or you go to a local mosque or other Muslim institution, get them to write a letter with their letterheaded paper to that MP. So really it's about amplifying the message. The more people who are saying the same thing, the more pressure the MP will face. And at the end of the day, the MPs are looking for brownie points. They're looking to build good relationships with residents and constituents and business owners in the local area. And if they're not hearing from you, then they'll be hearing from other people and they'll be prioritizing them. Make sure that you're on top of their priority list.
I think the comment of the event goes to Umair Khan, who's said a few text messages to Rishi Sunak's mobile phone may help the cause. If anyone has Rishi Sunak's text message phone number, then please let us know after the.
Yeah, let us all know.
there's so many. I mean, I didn't really expect so many different people to have gone through these kind of experiences. It's pretty crazy. There's a question: is there any other way around to start saving with the help of ISA, like scheme in place for my children's university education? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess this is this is a question that we could probably deal with, where you've got a whole load of Sharia compliant ISA providers out there these days, and ultimately an ISA is just a tax wrapper. As long as what you put in it is Sharia compliant, you can save for that. And there are Wahid Invest is actually coming out with its app very soon, which allows you to save for particular goals. So you could set yourself a goal for saving for your kids, and that'll help. And by the way, look, another hack for this is, like, if you just save 50 quid a month for about 18 years from the moment your child is born, you can actually massively cut down, if not eliminate entirely, the need for a student loan. So there are ways that you can try and work around this. And obviously it's better to not have a loan full stop than to have a loan. So if you can do that, you should do that. I guess perhaps for final words, maybe we come back to you, Asha, and as someone who I guess is at the heart of the storm right now on this topic, maybe you want to say just some final words to just wrap up and make the point, and tell people what they need to be doing now.
So I think I'm going to use an ayah from the Quran, which basically says that God doesn't change the condition of people until they change what is within themselves. So I think with that is, what is it that we're believing about ourselves, about our worth, about whether or not we deserve this, that we need to change within ourselves in order for our situation to be changed. So we need to ask, what has allowed this to happen for 10 years? What has, how many students who are from my kind of background where there's no support whatsoever have had to suffer with this alone? And what do we need to believe in about ourselves and the power that we have and the right that we have to an education that will hopefully enable something to happen? And so someone from my kind of background can just apply to university or medical school, and then they can just worry about doing well and make the most of the opportunity and nothing else. So that's what I would say. So please, let's keep going, let's keep talking about it, and let's not stay silent.
Many thanks. Many thanks, Asha. Many thanks to all of the panelists. It's been a fantastic event. I've learned a lot, and this is the start. This is not this is not the end. This is the start of a campaign. This is the first checkpoint in many checkpoints that are going to come, and we'll need your help on all of this. We'll keep pushing from our side, but please do your bit, because without that, what we are doing is not going to be particularly impactful. We need you to be writing to your MPs today and letting them know that this is an issue, and just kick up a fuss, kick off about it with as many people with influence and power and authority. Reach out to all of them, and make sure that your voice is heard. And thanks again for tuning in, and please feel free to share this video, which will be available permanently on this link, with people after this webinar ends as well. The link is below where you can write to your MP, and the template is below. And you can get in touch with all of the people on this panel via Twitter. I think would be probably a good way of doing it. Or if you drop the guys, obviously the IFG contact page, if you drop an email, we can pass it on as well to the right people. But many thanks once again, and until next time, Assalamu alaikum.